I would like to call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Des Moines Public Schools to order from May 1st, 2018. Please take the roll.
Natasha Newcomb.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle-Shelley.
Here.
Ms. Langford.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Ellsburn.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Barron.
The first item on our agenda this evening is approval of the agenda. Are there any requests to pull any items or discuss anything separately? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the agenda as printed.
Move approval.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from Natasha Newcomb. Please vote. Motion carries 7-0. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the April 17th, 2018 board meeting minutes. We have a motion from Natasha Newcomb and a second from Ms. Delagardelle-Shelley. Any discussion or corrections before we vote? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 6 with 1 abstention. We don't have any district recognitions tonight, so the next item on our agenda is the consent items. Before continuing, I would like to remind everyone in the audience that we allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information table to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among the board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determination as deemed necessary. We appreciate your input. Mr. Barron, I believe that you have the consent motion.
I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $4,250,904.18, and procurement card transactions in the amount of $550,975.02.
Is there a second?
Point of correction, 955 or 555,000.
Please correct the record that it was procurement card transactions in the amount of $555,975.02.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second, and we do have a speaker on our consent items. Maureen Griffin, if you could please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Maureen Griffin, 1603 Thompson Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. I'd like to speak to consent item D7. My name is on record to be terminated tonight. I'm going to try to get through this. On February 13th, my position was eliminated as a non-bargaining position. March 15th, I received a human resources email saying, due to the position being eliminated, you will not be receiving a contract for the next school year. I was then given an email this Tuesday from HR requesting that I resign or be terminated from my position. At that time, I refused to resign as I was confused why the position was eliminated. Why was the person being asked to resign? If I did not resign, I was suggested that I would be terminated, which is what brings me here tonight. I understand that the position I hold at Hoover is being eliminated. I am saddened by that, but realize that it's not my decision. However, I'm confused as to my status here. Am I being fired? Am I being laid off? Am I being placed in another position? The apparent request that I resign, under threat of termination does not offer much clarity to any of those questions. I'm not even quibbling over words. I'm totally unclear as to my future to a school district I've given 20 years of my life to, deeply love. I'm honored to have been a part of it. But frankly, tonight's move to terminate me when the position was eliminated, not the person, when I've not been given due cause, when I've not been evaluated in 2 years, when I haven't had a conversation about my performance in a negative manner ever, it's not fair. I beg this board to reconsider, have a conversation, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I don't believe we have any additional speakers. Is there any discussion before we move forward on our consent vote? Yes.
I guess I would just like that later.
About that later, is that what you
Yeah,
said?
I can't, that's something I can't discuss in a public meeting.
Yep.
Right, and the board delegates personnel decisions to the superintendent, and as well we should. But I agree with my colleague that we would appreciate
Sure.
whether it's one-on-one or however you decide.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
And just for the public, it is not our practice to discuss personnel matters in a public forum. And so certainly to the extent that individual board members need additional information, the superintendent will reach out and provide additional information and respond to any particular questions that board members may have regarding the personnel actions that are scheduled for this evening. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, well, my question is if we get information after the fact, understand that that's delegated to you, Tom, but we have to approve us. I mean, additional information does no good in terms of approval after the fact if we don't know. I'm just saying, I think there were some claims that were made that I personally, as an individual board member, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I don't feel comfortable voting on that without understanding more information. That would do no good to me after the fact. That's just my personal opinion.
Any additional board comments or questions before we move forward with the vote?
Yeah, that was going to be my question was, is there?
We have a motion on the floor to approve the consent items. It's typically not our practice to make amendments once the agenda has been approved. However, if someone wants to advance an amendment to the motion, it's certainly something that we can vote on if it receives a proper second.
I'll make a, oops, sorry. Yeah, I'll make a motion to pull item 7 off of the consent agenda.
I would suggest not doing that, as there's elections, leaves of absence, resignations that should be advanced
Okay. Right.
on that item.
7.
I think that we could, an appropriate, if I could,
Go ahead,
Please.
go ahead and,
way of doing it would be to amend my motion to approve the consent items with the exception of termination of the contract for the individual who spoke earlier this evening, and ask that that be held for future, just not acted on
Consider
this.
it, we will
Yeah.
consider it at a later date. So we have an amendment to the original motion to pull the termination of the contract for the individual that spoke this evening, Maureen Griffin. Is there a second to that amendment? We have a second to the amended motion, so we're first going to vote on the request for amendment, and then we will go to a vote on the motion as amended. So all in favor of approving the proposed amendment, please vote. The motion to amend passes. 5 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. So we will then move to voting on the motion as amended, which again is approving the consent items absent item number 7 with the inclusion of the termination of the contract for Maureen Griffin. So if we want to go ahead and vote on that. I'm so sorry, the vote was for? It's the motion as amended. The consent motion as amended. You clear about that? Okay, so we first had to approve the amendment. Now we vote on the motion as amended, and the motion as amended is to wait on item number, the termination of contract under item number D7, but vote favorably on everything else, or vote on everything else, not necessarily favorably. All right, everybody ready to vote? I think we're missing one. The motion passes 5 yes, 2 no. So the consent motion passes with the exception of the termination of the contract for Maureen Griffin that we will take up at the next meeting after an opportunity to discuss it with the superintendent. Okay.
Terry, I don't have a necessarily additional discussion. I was just wondering if, as a new board member, just wanted to put a request in with the superintendent to follow, that, just a reminder as myself, to follow up about Orchard Place Summer School, because I just would like a little more context around that item, and I apologize for not getting that email into you yesterday.
Okay.
But I just wanted to, I would just like some more information about that,
Sure.
please.
Great, thank you. All right, the next item.
If I could, I just want to own the fact, though, that and I think everybody else up here did not reach out in proper time to have the conversation off the record and
Correct.
prior and outside of open session on that item, and which is what I will own completely is not doing my job correctly and needs to be said in open session.
Appreciate that. The next item on our agenda is item number E1, open enrollment late applications for denial. I would ask the superintendent to please introduce this item.
As is the case at most of our meetings, following state code, we do accept late applications for open enrollment, and there are a number of due cause reasons why those can be approved. The ones that have not been approved are on the agenda this evening for your consideration.
I would entertain a motion and a second to deny the late applications for open enrollment identified by case number in the agenda based on district policy and state code. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from Langford. Are there any comments or questions from the board before we move to a vote? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to deny the late applications. Please vote. Motion carries 6-1. The next item on our agenda is item number E2, open enrollment appeals for denial. I would ask the superintendent to please introduce this matter.
Following the regular process of open enrollment applications for either open enrollment out or open enrollment in that have been denied per code are allowed to be appealed. And what you have on your agenda tonight are those since the last meeting that have been appealed and denied per code.
I would entertain a motion and a second on the item number E2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on item number E2, open enrollment appeals for denial. Are there any speakers, any discussion from the board? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item number E3, statewide penny sales tax bond series 2018. I would ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
Yes, I recommend that the board authorize and approve the final documents for the sales tax bonds series 2018.
I would ask Ms. Ellsburn to please advance the motion in a second before we move to board comment or questions.
Sure, I move the board approve the resolution appointing paying agent, bond registrar, and transfer agent, and authorize execution of the same. Approve the tax exemption certificate. Approve the continuing disclosure certificate, and approve the resolution authorizing the terms of issuance and providing for and securing payment of the school infrastructure sales, service, and use tax revenue bonds, Series 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the statewide penny sales tax bonds, Series 2018. This is actually a continuation of action that we took at the last board meeting when we actually approved the bids for the bonds. Is there any further discussion, question, or comment from the board? Hearing none, this does require a roll call vote, so I'll ask Deb to please call the roll.
Natasha Newcomb.
Yes.
Ms. Delagardelle-Shawley.
Yes.
Ms. Langford. Yes. Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Ellsburn.
Yes.
Ms. Anderson. Yes. Mr. Barron.
Yes.
I declare the resolution and certificates adopted by a vote of 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item number E4, DMTRS System Update. Dr. Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
Yeah, so as I think everyone on the board understands, the Des Moines Teacher Retirement System has been in existence for a very long time. Well, it predates IPERS by a few decades. In the last many years, we've had very few employees enroll in DMTRS, and the board has asked us to look at the possibility of potentially getting out of the pension business as a school district. So we have, through a whole long series of actions starting almost 2 years ago, we've achieved a change in state code that would allow a potential transfer of DMTRS covered employees, active employees, into the IPERS retirement system. That has been a long and complicated process, but we are getting very close to resolution on this. And what we're going to present to you tonight is basically where we are right now in the process. Even though it's not finished, there's been lots happening. Still a few things we're waiting on, but we have Kathy McKay, our benefits director, and our controller, Nick Lenhart, to provide some clarity about what our present status is.
So before you start, I'm going to take full and complete responsibility for this even being on the agenda tonight. Tomorrow is the annual meeting, and I thought that it was important for the full board to be fully apprised of everything that was happening. There's some big changes ahead, and so everybody is on the same page before we move forward with the annual meeting. I took liberty of putting this on the agenda, so if you all want to beat somebody up afterwards, it'll be me. But with that, I'll turn it over to Nick and Kathy. Thank you.
And it's only 3.5 hours tonight that we'll talk. So again, we're happy to be here tonight and kind of walk through this. So a little bit of background. We're going to try to keep this as simple as possible. The plan originated in 1953. At the time of
Long time ago.
it was a while back. At the time of origination, IPERS didn't exist in the form that it did today. So this plan was one of a few in the state. As it's evolved over time, DMTRS is a very different plan than IPERS, the Iowa Pension Employee Retirement System. It's also one of only a handful of plans like it in the United States. It's complicated. It's a defined contribution plan in the sense of an employee gives a portion to it, and then based on their account balances, that's what they're able to transfer over at retirement, which is different than IPERS. IPERS is based on years of service and your top 5 years of earnings. So very different plans. We started looking at this a few years ago because, one, we felt that it was in the best interest of our employees for us to get out of the pension business because we can't compete with IPERS. After many strategies of trying to determine if we could, we just financially couldn't compete. The other component was the membership. There's an intrigue there from the actives of rather being in IPERS when you compare them. That wasn't the case back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s, where this plan actually outperformed IPERS. But over time, it just doesn't perform anymore to the same level of IPERS, and we just felt that it was time to engage these. So what we've got here is a series, a timeline of the level of engagement that we've done throughout the membership, throughout the employee group and the retired group, to kind of tell you where we're at today, okay? We are planning on having an annual meeting tomorrow. That's standard protocol. We have one every year, and we'll walk through that a little bit. You all are invited to come. It's over at the East Auditorium. The retirees start around 2:30, and then we'll go into kind of a joint session at 4, and then we'll end with the actives around 4:15 until we're done, okay? But the timeline of events you can see here is that we started this with determining whether or not we can afford it, which was the right approach. We agreed that this was the right concept, but we needed to see if the plan can absorb it. And when we did that initial cost estimate back then, it came up to the point of this plan would have to contribute about an additional $11 million to be able to make these actives whole in IPERS, because at the end of the day, we can't transfer people over. We can't harm them. They need to go over at least at the same level that they had before. So it was $11 million. That's $11 million of plan assets, and this plan is very, very unique, not only in the sense of there's only a handful of them, it's also fully funded. Fully funded in pension terms means that there's actually enough in the assets, in the cash, and the investments to pay out all the future liabilities. So it's unique in today's environment. When you compare that to something like IPERS, it's at 82 to 83%. You look at the Illinois plan, it's at 45, 46%. It's very unique to have a plan that's fully funded. So we look at this and said, we can afford this. We started going through all these, everything that you see in front of you. I will not read to you tonight. But what you see here is we had several meetings, several levels of engagement. And we've got this advisory committee on this plan that's a membership of 9 people. 3 of them are community members. We currently have 2. We've got 3 that are retirees and 3 that are actives. And so we've engaged them throughout the process. And the biggest stumbling block through this process with the retirees has been, whose $11 million is that? And do excess earnings, and excess earnings for retirees is essentially a bonus check. At the end of each year, we do a calculation based on the performance of the plan on whether or not the retirees will get more than their guaranteed benefit.
Actually, I'd just like to add that it's not just the retirees that get the excess earnings. The actives have that applied to their account as well.
There's an interest application that comes to it, absolutely, and it gets to their balance and it grows over time. The retirees see the cash,
right,
if you will. So,
but I just think that that's important because
Excellent.
that gets left out, and I think that confuses unnecessarily.
right, agreed.
Right.
It's a great point. Thanks, Tom. So we went through this timeline where we've continued to engage and walk through, but this is a very complicated matter. And the most complicated part was ensuring that the legislator added 2 words that said we could do this change. We got that approved, and then we've tried to keep working through the details. Where we're at right now on the next page is we're in the month of May. We're at our board meeting tonight. We have our annual meeting tomorrow. IPERS currently has everything that they've asked for to this point. It's currently in actuarial review. They're doing a second review just to make sure that $11 million that the plan would need to contribute in addition. The total contribution is about $70 million to settle this transaction. That $11 million is still sound. So they're going through their analysis right now to see if there's any variables that changed. We hope to hear from them here within a week is what we're shooting for, because we really are shooting to take this to you guys for a vote on May 15th. And the reason why that date's significant is because in order to complete this transaction by June 30th, we've got to start the process with an IRS review. And the IRS requires a 30-day notification. And we only have 1 board meeting in June. And that happens to be after June 1st. We're talking 7 days here, but that's the way the calendar lied. So we're really pushing to try to get this to the point where we've got everything settled and squared away. We met with the advisory committee last night. We did ask for a formal vote of do you support or do you not support this merger, assuming $11 million of plan assets, assuming $70 million? There were 2 opposed. The opposed were the retiree members, and that's expected. And there were 5 that supported it, and 1 that abstained. So that was encouraging for us to move forward. The biggest issue, the biggest obstacle that we continue to work through on this is that concept of excess earnings. Tomorrow night, we'll be presenting to the retirees several models that our actuaries did, our investment advisors did, and our lawyers did that show that the concept of excess earnings does not go away. Excess earnings is driven based upon market performance, and what I mean by is stock market, bonds, things like that. If we assume a 5% rate of return, which is what we've historically been getting, at least 5% rate of return, we'll continue to pay out excess earnings. And in fact, in the models we've looked at, excess earnings will actually be paid out as, it's not a lot, but a higher amount than what would have been prior. And the reason why is because even though we're taking $70 million out of the plan, those liabilities go away too, which means we're not obligated to pay. That becomes IPER's responsibility. That decreases our asset value, but it also decreases our obligation. It also decreases the pool that we pay those excess earnings out, because as Tom alluded to, there's the actives, they're gone, and then there's fewer retirees. So they actually stand to benefit a little bit, not material, and that's not a driving factor in here, but it's been a point of uncertainty for a lot of the retirees. It's where Kathy and I have spent the vast majority of our time over the last few years, trying to clearly articulate that the sky's not falling, there's still hope, those kind of things. So assuming we get board action that gets approved on the 15th, we would then start the IRS review process. We would then come back for a reaffirmation in June, and that's simple, thinking through a consent lens. That's just to ensure we stay within the integrity of the plan document. And really, that's just, are we going to continue to proceed? And pretty minor. Then we transfer the assets in July, okay? After that, we start to make revisions to the trust document because the concept of actives will no longer exist. So, and that will all ultimately have to come to the board. That's the only reason why we're bringing it up tonight. So what's open? Do you want to walk through any of these or you want me to? Okay, so we hit up some of these. The concept of plan assets. There's been some uncertainty on whose $11 million is it? Is it the districts or the plans? We've gotten several opinions that fully support that it's the plan assets. It's really no one's. It's the plans. The plan can determine it's within the trust agreement. So we feel confident that these are plan assets. Excess earnings, are they going away or not? We feel confident that as long as the market performs, excess earnings don't go away. So there's still hope in the retirees' minds. 5-year actuarial study was one of the
I just want to make one other clarifying point because this is new for everyone. Excess earnings is in addition to what they
the guaranteed benefit
are guaranteed to get. So
it's a bonus check.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tom. There's a 5-year actuarial study that we have to do every 5 years that we didn't do for 10 years, so we just did one. And what we found through that actuarial review is that this plan's not in jeopardy. The mortality assumptions are still true. We have the latest updated mortality tables, and even with and what mortality tables are is there's a prediction of how long people are going to live and get benefits. It shows that this plan's still fully funded. So there's really no concerns there financially. And then the last clarifying point is what happens in the future. The actives would essentially become a part of the current actives today, people employed and contributing as of 2 years ago when we first made this announcement. They would then transfer over to IPERS, and it would become IPERS' responsibility to do the day-to-day management, do the forecasting, that kind of thing. We would still manage the retirees. We would still manage the inactives, the people who have left employment. And then we would strategize with the advisory committee on what does this plan continue to look like from a trust document? That's it. That's all we know. Anything to add? Okay.
Questions? Yes, Rob.
A couple questions. You just alluded to inactives, and that's probably appropriate to what I'm going to ask. In the past presentation, earlier in the process, you said, well, it's possible that some actives might be actually in better position by staying within the program or DMTRS if they're close to retirement, and that you would, whatever the process would go, you would work to make sure that the assets were in the plan that best suited them. Were there any active DMTRS members that will stay in DMTRS, or are they all advantaged by moving to IPERS?
At this point, IPERS is still going through the individual calculations. And so right now, we're talking the group as a whole, but we will identify individuals and look at what their benefits would be under Des Moines teachers and what their benefits would be under IPERS. And it has been our promise all along that no one will be harmed by moving. So if someone's benefit was better under Des Moines teachers, they would stay under Des Moines teachers.
And then on excess earnings, this $11 million figure is part of a larger amount of excess earnings that the plan is carrying at this point in time. Can you give us an idea of what that is?
Yeah, it's not really, the 11 million really isn't excess earnings.
It's not. It's
Because the excess earnings get paid out. So it's just part of the collective amount that is funding the plan that's been accumulated over time.
Right.
So it's not, it's just part of the plan asset. So when we talk about, is the plan fully funded? Right now, it's more than fully funded for everybody who's in it. So if we would remove the 11, that would be removed from the total pot, and then what remains still fully funds the individuals that remain in the plan, if that makes sense.
So I guess then perhaps my question is, what I'm trying to get to is the $11 million that would move with the actives does not take this plan from being 100% or 110% funded to 100% funded.
So Rob, how it works, like from a fair market value perspective, when we ran the latest model, was we would be at 107% funded from a market value perspective. A cost, I don't mean to get super nerdy, but a cost value perspective of the original purchase price of the investments, we'd be at 99 to 100% funded, which is very sound. So and that's why we say the concept of excess earnings doesn't change. The guaranteed benefits don't change, legally can't. So the plan's still in very good shape. And the reason why is really the transaction's a $70 million transaction, but with it goes a significant amount of liabilities and future obligations. So it shrinks the whole portfolio. But as long as the plan continues to perform at 5%, 5% is essentially a payout of $500,000 for kind of context, right? So 5% investment returns $500,000 on a $245 million plan. You know, we don't see anything there that leads us to believe this isn't, unless the market turns.
So then just last question then, contextually, for me, the retirees are upset that they feel money that they would get is leaving the plan. What does that actually look like? You said bonus, but I know that's not obviously the technical way. But what is that? Is that, $100? Is that $1,000? I mean, what does that look like?
It depends on the membership. So if you pay out $500,000, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but when you're at 5% rate of return, you're largely paying out, and this plan is extremely complicated, so forgive me. The most recent retiree group is the 2003, the post-2003. The post-2003s are guaranteed a rate of interest at 4.5%. So anything above a rate of return over 4.5% is considered excess and gets divvied out. That 500,000 goes to about 500 members. So 500,000 divided by 500, there's your excess earnings. You pay it out over the course of a year, so it's about $1,000. And we don't see that necessarily changing. If you go up to 6%, then that number essentially doubles. So if the market performs, the plan performs, and everybody kind of wins, if you will. And that's the conversation we continue to have with the advisory committee is, what does the investment mix look like? This is a very conservative plan, and it's done this plan extremely well. The reason why this plan is fully funded is because it's been conservative since 1953. It didn't capitalize on the 80s
Iowa.
gains, right? When equities went through the roof in the 80s, it didn't capitalize on that, but it sure benefited from Carter-era bonds. And there's still some Carter-era bonds at 15% interest in this plan. So it's done very well, you know,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
no worries.
Other questions from board members? Yes, Ms. Langford.
Ooh, just two. So I do know that you mentioned there's been a huge conversation over who that $11 million belongs to in the transfer, and you all said that there was experts that determined that essentially it's the plans. So I'm just wondering, who do we consult for that?
Well, we usually go through our legal firm, which is Allers and Cooley.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And the lawyer who's been involved in this plan, been involved with this plan for a number of years. That's not a recent relationship. That's been in place for a long time.
Yeah. I would also mention that even though they're not paid by the district for this work, we have a number of really outstanding subject matter experts that serve on the advisory committee that come with actuarial experience and really strong background to really help facilitate a lot of the discussion and the decision-making that happens at that table.
Yeah, they are phenomenal.
Okay. And then my second question was really to you, Madam Chair, because you had mentioned that there were some major changes coming up, but I didn't hear anything major happening. I mean, these are conversations we've been having for about the last year and a half. Are there any major changes happening?
I don't think it's major changes. I think it's getting closer to making everything happen.
It is.
I mean, it's like ready to turn.
Yeah.
You're very, very close.
Yeah.
Very close. And so we just didn't want to catch you guys off guard. We wanted to make sure you were informed because we're having an annual meeting tomorrow night.
Yep.
Right? I think that's important, but we also didn't want to catch you off guard coming back on May 15th. I think was the logic, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when I'm thinking about this shifting over at the end of this fiscal year, so next year's retirees would be the first retirees that would be switched over to IPERS were this to happen?
This year's.
This
This
year's
year's
actually.
would.
We-
Okay.
We have in the 20, 26, 27 people.
Actually, so long as they were contributing in the third quarter of 2016,
Okay,
they would be
okay,
moved over.
okay, perfect.
That was the first question IPERS asked us is how many people are going to retire on day one of this
Yeah.
plan?
Yeah.
Because they didn't want
300 or something?
300
Yeah,
running.
okay, okay, yep, nope, that's what I was wondering in terms of, you know, if I would get community member questions to just kind of, I mean, I will direct them to you, but sometimes there's things I can, yeah. My next question is, so you had mentioned that there are inactives. I'm assuming that these are staff members who previously worked in the district and were under this plan, and I just want to clarify that I'm understanding this because it is very complicated. So there's staff members who previously worked in the district and have perhaps left us to go work in other districts, either in this state or elsewhere. Whatever's in there that they've chosen to keep in there will stay in there until they retire?
Correct.
There is no option for them to convert that, correct?
IPERS isn't really interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
If, I'm going to get in the weeds, if they would, for whatever reason, come back to Des Moines later in their career, what happens to them? Do they, upon the new employment, are they contributing to IPERS?
Yeah, there will be no more active members in this plan.
So they
assuming it
would,
passes.
upon retirement,
Draw on both.
draw on both?
Correct.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Thank you so much.
And there's every scenario under the sun with those inactives in that 100 group.
Right.
So I appreciate not going through all 100.
Right, that was just the one I was thinking of because occasionally, particularly if we have, you know, administrators who maybe left us to go get experience somewhere else and
Yes.
want to come back, those are kind of the ones that I'm kind of thinking perhaps could bounce a little bit. So, yes, thank you.
Other questions from the board? Yes.
When you said, when you were talking about the 2 that opposed and 5 supported and 1 abstained, is that just like the, board or?
It's the advisory
board
committee
advisory?
group, yeah.
Is that what it is? And then
Yep.
how, do you have a feeling of how the members are overall, or?
I didn't hear you, Heather.
Do you have a feeling of how the members overall are feeling about this then?
Well, the actives are very much supportive of this plan.
Right.
There really isn't much opposition there that we've heard from. The retirees, in complete sincerity, once we continue to articulate and show these models, they'll get there. I spent my afternoon going through several of these scenarios with retirees, and once we got off the phone, they were clearer, and they're going to ask, hopefully ask these same questions tomorrow night for the larger group. But even some of the biggest opponents, once they saw that this concept of excess earnings isn't gone, it kind of calmed everyone down,
That's good.
to
Okay.
be sincere.
Thanks.
Any additional questions?
So,
Yes.
a quick question. So when you're going through the individual plans, decide for those that are soon to retire, if, you know, it does them best to stay with DMPS or go to IPERS, the do no harm thing. Would you anticipate them being more of a higher risk, or would that just pretty much status quo things for DMPS's retirement plan? I know, does that even make sense? You're looking at me like, nope, not making any sense.
I'm trying to follow you.
Well, because right now we kind of have an idea of what the pool looks like, but would that shift that and make a change?
No.
Okay.
Cool.
We don't, we don't see,
I don't see significant.
Many staying back is what I'm saying, so.
it's really, when you look at it, one, there's a no harm clause.
Right.
So we can't harm them, and we wouldn't want to. It wouldn't be in anyone's best interest. That wouldn't be the right answer. But because the plans, and like what we said with our opening, because these plans are so significantly different, and because IPERS essentially does a guarantee based on service, and because DMTRS can't compete with that level of benefit, there's really no one that would be harmed from this move.
I'm not talking about like the individuals themselves.
Right.
It's just the calculations of the overall plan.
Oh,
If
there's-
that remains.
Actually, the plan, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in some ways, the plan gets lessens its risk because we're not introducing new folks into it. So
Correct.
we understand with much more clarity, month over month and year over year, the future of the plan. And there's actually potential for some folks in there to benefit, you know, depending on how mortality goes, better, because plans are designed to go on to infinity, basically. They're rarely
Right.
ended, you know, which is why there's only, you know, what, a small handful of these in the country. So when all the actives move out, all that liability goes with them. A fully funded plan, and then any changes and unpredicted changes in mortality then tend to advantage those, because at some point, long time down the road, there's going to be, you know, 5 people left who are going to be
Right.
way more than well-funded.
That's what I mean, with the actives, that it's, the do no harm clause requires them to stay with DMPS if that's gonna increase any liability issues.
No.
Sounds like-
So I'm sorry. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the fact that they go over to IPERS actually gives.
No, the ones that are not.
Oh,
If we
the
identify
inactives, right.
a chunk of them
Right.
not going,
It-
does that significantly change
It
the
doesn't,
calculations?
because their benefits are essentially frozen in that point in time.
Okay.
You know,
They're
it's,
not collecting, they're not contributing.
yeah, because it's such a different, this is essentially like a 401k plan that then turns into a defined benefit plan at the end. So there's really not a lot of risk exposure there.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was,
Right.
sorry it took me a while to
It's all
spit
good.
that up.
Yeah, all good. No worries at all.
Any additional board questions?
I just want to thank Nick for coming and, you know, entertaining all of our questions, so.
Happy to help. If you guys have more, you know where to find us.
Thank you. Appreciate you both and all your hard work on this. I know it's been a labor of love, right?
It's been a labor. Yeah.
Right. It's been a
I would
labor.
have been smarter as a 10-year-old.
All right, so the next item on the agenda are items of privilege in the chair's report. I don't really have anything to report, but I do want to appropriately and properly acknowledge Deb for all of her hard work. Last week was Administrative Professionals Day, and typically when I'm in town, I make every effort to not only stop by and say hi to Deb, but bring her a nice little bouquet of flowers or something. But unfortunately, I was traveling last week and unable to do that, but I didn't want all of your efforts and hard work on behalf of the board to go unnoticed, and we really appreciate all you do, Deb, so thank you very much. Anything else from other board members?
So legislative session, still not over. SAVE is still stuck in the Senate. Those who have a relationship with Brad Zahn, or a relationship with somebody who has a relationship with him, who could who could encourage that, as well as the leadership of the Senate, that we really need that to move in the right direction and be extended. That would be of great help to the district and to Iowa. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else over here have anything to share? On this side?
I just wanted to mention that I had the opportunity to be, as part of my day job, at the World Food Prize Iowa Youth Institute, and there were a number of Des Moines Public School students there, including an exchange student who I believe is attending either Roosevelt or Hoover High School, who gave a wonderful keynote address at the end of the day, and I am sorry that I didn't write down her name, but I just wanted to say that there is some fantastic stuff happening in Des Moines, and I love it when my two worlds collide and I get to interact with those students and see that. So if you were a student at the Iowa Youth Institute yesterday, congratulations on your hard work. I know all of the work that goes into that.
Great, thank you. Superintendent's report, anything?
I would just ask everyone to please keep Thomas Harper and Ann Sullivan in their thoughts and prayers as they continue to work through some very, very challenging health issues.
Great. Well, with no further business and without objection, the meeting for May 1st, 2018 is adjourned, and we will move into a closed session as soon as the room clears.